The actor Roger Moore has died at the age of 89 following a short illness. Best known for his role as James Bond, he received a knighthood for his work with the children's charity UNICEF.
Roger Moore may have been the smooth, unshakable James Bond on screen, but his real life was far more complicated. Behind the fame were 4 marriages, 3 children, and personal struggles that rarely made the headlines. After his death, one of his luxurious and full-of-life homes now sits abandoned, a quiet echo of the man who once lived there. Moore left behind a huge net worth, but also a sense of unfinished stories. His life had all the drama of a movie, but the ending was far more bittersweet. What became of Roger Moore's wealth and the people he left behind? Moore as an actor. Before we get to his life struggles, we need to understand how big of a Hollywood star Roger Moore is. He was one of those rare actors who managed to carve out a distinctive and lasting legacy in film and television without ever seeming like he was trying too hard. His screen presence was marked by charm, elegance, and an almost effortless cool that made him instantly likable, no matter the role. For many, he is most famously remembered as the man who played James Bond in 7 films from 1973 to 1985, a longer tenure than any other actor in the role. But Moore was much more than just 007. He was a seasoned performer whose style and persona shaped the characters he played, rather than being shaped by them. He didn't rely on intense method acting or disappear into complex psychological roles. Instead, he played to his strengths: a smooth voice, a quick wit, and a gentlemanly demeanor that rarely cracked under pressure. These qualities made him a unique figure in the world of cinema, and one that audiences returned to again and again for comfort, fun, and a little escapism. Before stepping into Bond's perfectly tailored tuxedo, Moore had already made a name for himself in British and international television. Shows like The Saint, where he played the clever and charming Simon Templar, and The Persuaders, where he starred alongside Tony Curtis, laid the groundwork for what would become his trademark style. These characters, much like Bond, were polished, clever, and good-humored, navigating danger and intrigue with a dry joke and an arched eyebrow. Moore had a talent for making audiences feel as though he was winking at them from behind the screen, letting them in on the fun. He didn't just play roles, he inhabited them in a way that felt both relaxed and completely in control. That was part of his appeal. He never seemed rattled, never seemed to be working too hard. He made acting look easy, and that's something very few can do. When Moore took over the role of James Bond from Sean Connery, he faced both high expectations and deep skepticism. Connery had established a rougher, colder version of Bond, one that many fans considered definitive. But Moore didn't try to imitate what came before him. Instead, he redefined the character with his own approach, bringing a lighter, more humorous tone to the franchise. His Bond was still capable, still deadly when needed, but he was also more playful, more prone to quips and one-liners, and somehow more accessible to the audience. This wasn't just a stylistic shift. It was a bold move that breathed new life into the series and kept it relevant for over a decade. Moore's Bond films might not have been the grittiest or most emotionally complex entries in the franchise, but they were undeniably fun, filled with exotic locations, outrageous villains, and action sequences that didn't take themselves too seriously. And through it all, Moore was the glue that held it together, a consistent, charismatic presence who never lost his cool. But what truly set Roger Moore apart as an actor was his understanding of his own screen identity. He didn't try to be what he wasn't. He played to his strengths and understood what audiences wanted from him. Whether he was playing a secret agent, a rogue aristocrat, or a mischievous adventurer, he brought the same mix of polish and self-awareness to the screen. He knew when to play it straight and when to let the humor shine through. And above all, he understood the importance of entertainment, of giving audiences something enjoyable, something stylish, something a little larger than life. That sensibility made him one of the most dependable leading men of his generation. Fun fact: Moore played Bond in 7 films, more than any other actor, tied with Daniel Craig in terms of number, but Moore had a longer total run. Let's take a look at these badass movies he made. D-Bond in 7 films. Live and Let Die, 1973. Roger Moore's first outing as Bond was a wild ride. Right from the jump, this film felt different. It brought Bond into the funky, flashy world of 70s America and the Caribbean, with voodoo magic, harmful substance lords, and a killer theme song by Paul McCartney. Moore was less brooding than Connery. He brought a cheekier, more laid-back vibe. There's a boat chase that's pure mayhem, and a scene where Bond uses crocodiles as stepping stones. Not exactly subtle, but definitely memorable. The Man with the Golden Gun, 1974. This one pits Bond against the ultra-cool assassin Scaramanga, played by Christopher Lee. Yes, Dracula himself. The gimmick here is that the villain only needs one bullet. Literally, he's got a golden gun and never misses. The film is a bit uneven, with some campy humor and questionable side characters. Looking at you, Sheriff J.W. Pepper. But it's still a good time. And let's not forget the car that does a mid-air corkscrew flip. Pure Bond madness. The Spy Who Loved Me, 1977. Now we're talking. This one is often considered Moore's best Bond film. It's slick, stylish, and has one of the most iconic villain's lairs, an underwater base. The movie introduces the unforgettable henchman Jaws, a giant with metal teeth. Bond teams up with a Soviet agent, XXX, which creates a fun rivalry-turned romance. Plus, there's a car that turns into a submarine. It's over the top in the best way, and Moore is right in his element here. Moonraker, 1979. This is where things get really out there, literally. Moonraker sent Bond into space. After Star Wars became a hit, the Bond producers decided, why not throw in a space battle? The result is a weird, flashy sci-fi twist on the spy formula. Jaws returns, there's a laser gun fight in orbit, and Bond even seduces a space scientist, because of course he does. It's cheesy but entertaining, and Moore commits fully to the absurdity. For Your Eyes Only, 1981. After the space shenanigans, this film brought things back down to earth, literally and tonally. For Your Eyes Only is more grounded, with a focus on Cold War espionage and underwater action. Moore plays it a bit more serious here, and the movie benefits from the shift. There's a gripping rock-climbing finale, a solid car chase, and fewer gadgets. It's not as flashy as some of the others, but it's solid Bond. Octopussy, 1983. This one gets a lot of laughs for the name alone, but it's actually a fun adventure. Bond goes to India, joins a circus, and tries to stop a nuclear disaster. Moore is older here, but still pulling off stunts, disguises, and some very Roger Moore-level flirting. There's even a sequence where he dresses as a clown. Yes, a literal clown, to stop a bomb. Ridiculous? Sure, but weirdly enjoyable. A View to a Kill, 1985, Moore's final Bond film. And by now he was definitely looking a bit too old for the part. But hey, he still had charm. Christopher Walken plays the villain, Max Zorin, and he's delightfully unhinged. The plot involves microchips and a plan to destroy Silicon Valley. Grace Jones shows up as a fierce henchwoman, and there's a chase up and down the Eiffel Tower. The action's fun, even if the whole thing feels like it's trying a bit too hard to be hip. Still, not a bad send-off. Roger Moore's Bond was all about style, wit, and a raised eyebrow. He wasn't the toughest or most intense Bond, but he had charisma for days. Because of huge projects such as these, he gained a really good amount of fortune. Wealth and properties behind. There's something a little eerie, but also deeply fascinating about the idea of an abandoned mansion, especially when it belonged to someone as iconic as Roger Moore. The man wasn't just an actor, he was the saint. He was James Bond for over a decade, and he carried that suave charm both on and off screen. Now, Moore wasn't exactly known for flashy Hollywood excess in his personal life, but make no mistake, he did very well for himself. By the time he passed away his estimated net worth was somewhere north of $100 million. That's not pocket change. A good chunk of that came from his Bond films, of course, but he also did quite a bit of television, endorsement work, voice acting, and let's not forget his status as an enduring global celebrity. People loved him, his cool demeanor, that raised eyebrow, the way he made even the cheesiest one-liners sound like pure gold. When it comes to property, Roger Moore definitely had options. He was never the kind of star to plant roots in just one place. He had a luxury apartment in Monte Carlo, right in the middle of that glittering Mediterranean fantasy land. Monaco, of course, is a haven for the ultra-wealthy, and Moore fit right in there, living a comfortably lavish life without drawing too much attention to himself. He also spent a good amount of time in Switzerland, where he had another beautiful estate. This one nestled among mountains, lakes, and fresh alpine air. And of course, he had connections to the UK, owning homes in England throughout his career. But it's this one house, this abandoned property, that people can't stop talking about. It's become a bit of a mystery. Located in a quiet part of the French Riviera, surprise, surprise, it was reportedly left behind after Moore moved on to other places. It's got all the makings of a cinematic relic. Overgrown gardens, ivy crawling up the sides, faded grandeur behind locked doors. You walk past it, and it's almost like the ghosts of tuxedos and martinis still linger there. Neighbors say no one's lived in it for years, yet it hasn't been demolished or sold off. It just sits there, a decaying slice of Bond-era luxury. There's no clear answer as to why it was abandoned. Maybe legal red tape, maybe family decisions after his passing, or perhaps it was just a place he let go of emotionally long before he died. What's wild is that someone with a portfolio as polished as Moore's would have any loose ends like that. The man had taste. We're talking designer interiors, antique furniture, sprawling views. Each of his homes was a statement. Who knows? Maybe Moore's ghost likes it that way. One house left behind as a quiet monument to a life lived in the spotlight. But was it all about glitz and glamour when he was alive? The unseen life of Moore. Moore's journey through marriage and fatherhood wasn't always glamorous, but it was certainly eventful. And it revealed a softer, more vulnerable side to the suave actor the world thought it knew so well. One of the most formative chapters of his early personal life was his marriage to his first wife, Dorn Van Stein, a woman who played a significant role in shaping his early career and identity. Roger Moore began his career in the entertainment industry as a model before transitioning to acting. It was during this formative period that he met and fell in love with Dorn Van Stein, a fellow aspiring actor and former ice skater. They married in 1946, when Moore was just 18 years old. Van Stein, who was older and more experienced in show business, played an instrumental role in helping Moore navigate the early challenges of the acting world. Their relationship, however, was far from idyllic. According to Moore's later accounts, the marriage was fraught with arguments and even physical abuse. In his autobiography, Moore recalled the volatility of their relationship, suggesting that the young couple was ill-suited and that Van Stein's temperament and possessiveness clashed with his own ambitions and personality. He also candidly described the marriage as hell on earth, reflecting the emotional strain it placed on him. Professionally, Van Stein helped Moore connect with acting opportunities and introduced him to influential figures in the entertainment industry. But as Moore's career began to take off, eventually leading to major roles in British television series like The Saint, the strain in their marriage grew. The couple divorced in the early 50s, and Moore later married singer Dorothy Squires, marking the next chapter in his eventful personal life. Moore's relationship with Dorn Van Stein represents both a beginning and a lesson in his life. While it was not a happy union, it was a significant one. It marked the start of his journey in show business and left an indelible impact on his understanding of relationships and personal resilience. As Moore evolved into an international star and a beloved actor, the hardships of his early marriage remained a private reminder of the challenges that often accompany youthful ambition and fame. Moore's first marriage to Dorn Van Stein was emblematic of his early struggles, both personal and professional. It was a tumultuous partnership that, while painful, helped set the stage for the remarkable career and life that would follow. And then Dorothy came. Almost immediately after his turbulent first marriage to Dorn, Van Stein ended. Roger Moore found himself drawn into another emotionally charged relationship, this time with the popular Welsh singer and actress Dorothy Squires. Their romance began in the late 40s and culminated in marriage in 1953. But from the very start, their relationship was anything but conventional. Squires was 13 years Moore's senior and already an established star in the British entertainment world. In contrast, Moore was still struggling to find his footing as a young actor. Despite the age gap and the social taboos it carried at the time, the couple defied expectations. Squires was vibrant, charismatic, and headstrong, and she believed wholeheartedly in Moore's potential. She became something of a patron and protector to him, investing in his early career and using her fame and industry connections to help open doors. Yet, beneath the surface, their relationship was fraught with tension. The dynamic between them, of an established star supporting a rising one, slowly began to unravel as the balance of fame shifted. By the mid-50s, Moore was gaining traction in the film and television world, landing roles in productions like Ivanhoe and The Saint, while Squires' career was beginning to decline. This reversal of fortunes sparked a deep and growing resentment. Squires, once the star and mentor, began to feel eclipsed by her younger, increasingly successful husband. Moore later described the relationship as emotionally volatile and, at times, deeply painful. Despite public appearances, their private life was marked by frequent arguments and accusations. Squires was known for her dramatic personality and fiery temper, traits that clashed with Moore's quieter, more diplomatic nature. Their marriage grew increasingly strained as Moore traveled frequently for work, spending more and more time away from home. The turning point came in the early 60s, when Moore was filming in Italy and met Luisa Mattioli, a beautiful Italian actress. The two fell in love, and Moore wanted to leave Squires and start a new life. However, this would prove far more difficult than he had imagined. Squires refused to grant him a divorce, holding on to the marriage with a kind of defiant intensity. What followed was a long and bitter legal and personal battle, playing out both behind closed doors and in the pages of the British tabloids. For years, Squires continued to publicly claim her position as Moore's lawful wife, even as his relationship with Mattioli deepened and they began a family together. It wasn't until 1969, after nearly a decade of delays and emotional turmoil, that the divorce was finally granted, allowing Moore to marry Louisa Mattioli. In retrospect, Roger's marriage to Dorothy Squires was as dramatic as any film plot he would later appear in. It was a relationship defined by passion, ambition, resentment, and heartbreak, one that mirrored the broader themes of love and fame in the often unforgiving world of show business. While it was clear the marriage brought pain to both parties, it also profoundly shaped Moore's understanding of relationships, loyalty, and the personal cost of fame. Moore would later speak of Squires with a mixture of regret and sympathy, acknowledging the hurt that passed between them while also recognizing her early support and belief in his talent. Their relationship stands as a cautionary tale of what happens when love becomes entangled with ego, fame, and the shifting tides of fortune. After a long and bitter battle, he was finally free to marry Louisa. Louisa Mattioli was, in many ways, the great love of Roger Moore's life and the person with whom he built the closest semblance of a traditional family. Their relationship began in the late 50s, under complicated circumstances. Both were involved in other relationships at the time, but their bond proved enduring. After nearly a decade together, they married in 1969, cementing a union that had already weathered many of life's challenges. During their time together, they welcomed 3 children: Deborah, Jeffrey, and Christian. Roger Moore often spoke with warmth and pride about fatherhood, expressing how much joy and meaning his children brought to his life. He candidly admitted that balancing the glamour and demands of the Bond lifestyle with being a present parent was often a struggle, but he remained emotionally connected to his kids throughout his life. They were a continual source of pride, grounding him in the values of family, even as he portrayed a globe-trotting secret agent on screen. Unfortunately, Moore and Louisa's relationship, like many others under the strain of fame and distance, did not last forever. Over time, cracks began to form in their marriage, exacerbated by the pressures of celebrity life and the long stretches of separation that Moore's work entailed. Though they shared many happy years and significant milestones, their relationship gradually unraveled. By the early 90s, Moore had fallen in love with Christina Kiki Tholstrup, a Swedish socialite and longtime family friend. The breakdown of his marriage to Louisa was painful and highly public, and Moore later described it as one of the more difficult chapters of his personal life. Their divorce was finalized in 1996, after years of estrangement. Despite the end of their marriage, Moore always spoke respectfully of Louisa and acknowledged the important role she played in his life. She was the woman with whom he raised a family, shared decades of history, and navigated some of the most formative years of his career. Their time together, while ultimately finite, left an enduring mark on Moore's personal journey, one filled with love, complexity, and the shared joys and trials of parenthood. After over 30 years together, the marriage began to deteriorate, especially as Moore faced a series of health scares, including prostate cancer. During this difficult time, he found comfort in a new relationship with Christina. Though it caused some tension in the family, Moore and Christina eventually married in 2002, after his divorce from Louisa. Kiki brought stability and companionship to Moore's later years, and by most accounts, she was by his side with unwavering support as he transitioned into retirement and devoted more time to charity work, especially his beloved role as a UNICEF ambassador. Throughout all his marriages and personal ups and downs, Roger Moore remained, at heart, a gentleman. Sure, he had his flaws. He was the first to admit he could be indecisive and perhaps too polite for his own good, but he valued love and loyalty, even when relationships didn't turn out the way he hoped. His bond with his children endured through the decades, and his late-life marriage to Kiki gave him the peace and partnership that had eluded him in earlier years. Certainly, Kiki wasn't the only one who kept him inspired during his late years. His 3 children were out of the spotlight, but made a huge difference in his life. Children behind. While the world admired his charm and cinematic presence, at home he had a very different role. Dad. Roger Moore had 3 children, like we mentioned earlier: Deborah, Jeffrey, and Christian Moore, from his marriage to Louisa. Their relationship with their father, like many families, had its ups and downs, but overall, Moore's bond with his children was rooted in love, a strong sense of humor, and a touch of British formality that often gave way to genuine warmth. Deborah Moore, the eldest, followed in her father's footsteps and became an actress. She's probably the most publicly recognized of Roger's kids. She acted under the name Deborah Barrymore for a time, and even appeared in a James Bond-themed commercial, which was a bit of a cheeky nod to her father's legacy. Deborah once mentioned in interviews how surreal it was to grow up with a dad who was James Bond to the rest of the world, but simply Dad at home. Roger wasn't a disciplinarian in the strictest sense, but he did carry that old-school British politeness and structure into his parenting. He was supportive of Deborah's career and proud of her, though he often tried to shield his children from the pressures of fame, encouraging them to pursue their own paths rather than live in his shadow. Jeffrey and Christian Moore, Roger's sons, lived more out of the spotlight, but they were just as close to their father. Jeffrey has worked as a restaurateur and entrepreneur and dabbled in music and film. Christian, the youngest, took an interest in film production. Roger was especially keen on giving his sons space to develop their own identities. Despite his hectic filming schedule, he made a real effort to be involved in their lives, whether it was family holidays, dinners, or just chatting on the phone. His children often recalled how he made them laugh. Humor was a huge part of his personality, and he used it as a way to connect, diffuse tension, and bond with his kids. His style of parenting might not have been hands-on in the modern sense. He wasn't changing diapers while on location, but he was present in the ways that mattered emotionally. In interviews and in his memoirs, Roger Moore spoke fondly of his children, though he was candid about the challenges. He admitted that balancing his work and family life wasn't always easy, especially with the demands of being an international film star. There were moments of distance and regret, but there was also a clear through line of affection and pride. As they grew older, Roger's kids became more involved in his life, especially during his later years. When he became a UNICEF ambassador, his children admired how much heart he poured into humanitarian work, and it became a source of mutual respect. The Moore children were all present and deeply affected when Roger passed away in 2017. Their joint statement after his death was full of love, gratitude, and humor, a reflection of the kind of father he was. They remembered him not just as James Bond or the saint, but as a kind gentleman who taught them the value of kindness, dignity, and not taking oneself too seriously. Behind the scenes, age and illness were catching up with him. He battled cancer quietly, without much public attention. The world was stunned to hear that Roger Moore had passed away in Switzerland, surrounded by his family, at the age of 89. The news came as a heavy blow, not just to Bond fans, but to anyone who appreciated old-school charm and elegance. What made his death even more emotional was the wave of love and memories that poured in from all over the world. Fellow actors, fans, and even charities he supported shared heartfelt tributes. Many recalled how generous and down-to-earth he was, how he always had time for others, even when he didn't have to. Who will inherit his riches? The story of who actually inherited that wealth is a bit complicated and far from straightforward. Initially, it was believed that his fourth wife, Christina, would inherit a large portion of his fortune. However, legal challenges and guardianship arrangements later muddied the waters, leading to a freeze on the estate's control. This means that the exact distribution of Moore's wealth has been tied up in court for some time. What we do know for sure is that Roger Moore had 3 children from his previous marriages, and they are considered the primary beneficiaries of his estate. Even so, the details of how the money is divided haven't been publicly settled because of ongoing legal proceedings. On top of that, Moore's legacy continues to generate income through royalties from his iconic James Bond films. Even after his death, his work keeps contributing to the family fortune and his overall financial legacy. But focusing solely on money wouldn't do justice to who Roger Moore really was. He was deeply committed to philanthropy and used his fame to support many charitable causes. Most notably, he was a UNICEF Goodwill Ambassador from 1991 until his death. This role wasn't just a title. Moore actively worked to raise awareness and funds for children in need around the world. His efforts on behalf of children's rights and welfare were heartfelt and persistent, showing a different side to the man behind the tuxedo. Moore's charity work didn't stop with UNICEF. He was also a passionate advocate for animal rights, particularly campaigning against the production and sale of foie gras, which he saw as cruel. His activism actually helped push major retailers like Selfridges to stop selling foie gras, marking a real change in public awareness and retail policy. Besides animal rights, he supported a number of other humanitarian causes, including the Elton John AIDS Foundation, Save the Children, and the Red Cross. This broad scope of charitable work highlights how much Moore cared about making a positive impact on the world beyond his acting career. While the full details of who inherited Roger Moore's wealth remain a bit uncertain due to legal complications, his philanthropic legacy is crystal clear. His dedication to humanitarian causes, children's welfare, and animal rights ensures that his influence stretches far beyond the box office. Thanks for staying until the end. Give a thumbs up if you liked the video and subscribe for more.